I saw it happening long before anyone else did, and I knew it would end in heartbreak. I watched my sister Lily fall for a man who stood for everything she swore she hated. I saw how the arguments turned into something deeper, something dangerous. I tried to warn her, but some feelings are stronger than reason, stronger than loyalty, stronger even than blood. And when it all finally fell apart, none of us were ready for how much it would hurt. My name is Jack Hart, and my life was supposed to be simple. I was a father, a husband, and in my eyes, a pretty good one at that. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It all started the day Lily came back to town. Lily Hart, my little sister, had always been the free spirit of our family. Growing up, she was the one who would challenge everything we believed in, the one who refused to settle for the mundane. I remember her, a whirlwind of energy and confidence, always walking to the beat of her own drum. We all loved her for it, even when it drove us crazy. It had been years since Lily had left for the city. She'd been working as a journalist, chasing stories, meeting new people, and making her own way. When she called to tell me she was moving back, I could feel the change in the air before I even picked her up from the airport. "Jack, you're not going to believe the crazy things I've seen," she said as we made our way back to our family home. "People are wild, you know? It's not like it is here." I just chuckled, knowing Lily's knack for exaggerating. But there was something in her eyes that made me pause. Something deeper. We spent the next few days catching up, sharing stories, and falling into that familiar rhythm of family life. But there was one thing that felt different. Lily didn't want to talk about her job, her life in the city, or her adventures. Instead, she kept talking about this man she'd met, Caleb Morgan. A man who was impossible to ignore, she said. I didn't think much of it at first. You know how it is with new crushes, right? They're exciting, they're new, but they burn out just as quickly. But then I met Caleb. Caleb Morgan. Tall, with dark hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to look straight through you. He wasn't just handsome. He had this way of carrying himself that made you believe he knew something you didn't. I knew right away, the first time I saw him, that there was something about him that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way he looked at Lily, like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. Or maybe it was the way he spoke, like everything he said was meant to impress, to manipulate. But Lily was smitten, and no matter how much I tried to warn her, she refused to listen. "You're just being protective, Jack," she would say. "I can handle myself." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb was trouble. I just didn't know how much trouble yet. Weeks went by, and Lily's obsession with Caleb deepened. It started small, phone calls late at night, long texts, the kind of thing that feels innocent at first. But then came the invitations to dinner, the constant need to run into him at the coffee shop, and eventually the late nights at his place. It was only a matter of time before I started noticing the cracks. The way Lily would talk about Caleb in a way that didn't sound like admiration anymore, but something more dangerous, something like love. I remember the moment it hit me. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting on the porch watching my kids play in the yard. Lily was inside with Caleb, the two of them sitting so close on the couch that I could see how he had his arm draped over her shoulders, the way she leaned in toward him, her eyes soft and full of adoration. It made my stomach churn. I didn't say anything then. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think this was just some phase, that she'd snap out of it and come back to her senses. But deep down, I knew I was wrong. I knew what was coming, and I couldn't stop it. Thank you for all the love and support, everyone. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more heart-wrenching drama like this. Let's dive right back into the tale. As the days went on, things got harder to ignore. Caleb seemed to be everywhere. He'd show up at family gatherings, at the grocery store, even at the kids' school functions. Everywhere I turned, there he was, slipping into our lives in ways that made me feel uncomfortable, like a shadow creeping through the cracks of my marriage. And then, one evening it happened. I walked into the kitchen to find my wife, Sarah, sitting at the table, her eyes glued to her phone. "Sarah," I asked, a knot forming in my chest, "who are you texting?" She looked up, her expression momentarily blank before she quickly covered it up. "Just work stuff," she said a little too quickly. But there was something in her eyes, something that told me I wasn't the only one noticing the changes. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, caught between the love I had for my wife and the growing suspicion that something was slipping away from me. I had always prided myself on being able to protect my family, to shield them from anything that could cause harm. But this was different. I had no idea how to fight this feeling or how to fight the growing bond between Lily and Caleb. I knew they were more than just friends. I knew I was standing on the edge of something irreversible, and I couldn't stop it. It was the silence that got to me first. The kind of silence that fills the space between two people when they're no longer saying what they really think, but instead pretending everything is fine. Sarah and I hadn't been the same for a while. Sure, we still had our routines, the kids' school drop-offs, the grocery runs, the occasional date night that felt more like a formality than anything special, but the spark, the connection, it was gone. And I couldn't put my finger on why. I'd always considered myself a good husband. I'd worked hard, come home on time, been a good father to our kids. Sure, we had our moments of tension, like any couple, but nothing that felt like it would shake the foundation of our marriage. But I couldn't ignore the way Sarah had been acting lately. Her distance, the way she'd start to say something and then stop, as though she was weighing every word before it left her mouth. The way she'd glance at her phone more often than at me when we were in the same room. And then there was Caleb Morgan, the man my sister couldn't get enough of. The man who was weaving his way into our lives like an unwelcome guest, a guest that none of us were brave enough to show the door. One evening, I came home to find Caleb sitting at our kitchen table with Lily, both of them deep in conversation. The air was thick with something unspoken, something I couldn't quite place. They stopped talking as soon as I walked in, their eyes meeting for just a second before quickly turning back to the papers in front of them. "Jack," Lily said brightly, standing up. "I didn't know you'd be home this early." I gave her a tight smile and nodded. "Yeah, I finished up early today. How's everything?" "Good, good," Lily replied, her voice a little too cheerful. "Caleb's just helping me with some work for the article I'm writing. Nothing serious." I looked over at Caleb. He wasn't smiling. His jaw was clenched, his eyes were dark, and he didn't make the usual attempt at small talk that he'd done the first few times we'd met. There was something in his gaze that sent a shiver down my spine. "Right," I said, my voice even. "Well, I'm going to grab a beer." The silence between us thickened like a fog, and I knew, deep down, that something was slipping away, from Lily, from Caleb, from me. As I walked away from the kitchen, I heard Caleb's voice just behind me. "Jack, can I talk to you for a minute?" I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a pulse of anxiety. What did he want? What more could he possibly want in my life, in my family's life? But I turned around anyway, forcing a polite smile. "Sure, Caleb. What's up?" He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, and for the first time, I saw the man behind the facade. The way his eyes narrowed, the way his lips twisted into a half-smirk. He wasn't the charming, confident man I had first met. No, this time, he looked dangerous. "I just want you to know," Caleb said, his voice low, "I care about your sister. A lot." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my cool. "I know you do. Just don't hurt her, all right?" There was a brief moment of silence, where Caleb's gaze never left mine. It felt like we were playing a game, only neither of us knew the rules. "You don't need to worry about that," Caleb replied, his voice still calm, but with a sharp edge. "But maybe you should worry about something else." I raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, just enough that I could smell the faint scent of cologne and something else, something that made me uneasy. "Just keep an eye on your wife, Jack. You never know what people might be hiding." And then, before I could respond, Caleb turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling like the ground had just been pulled from under me. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, my thoughts tangled in knots. What did Caleb mean by that? Was he trying to intimidate me? Or was there something I wasn't seeing? I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on, that he was playing some kind of game I hadn't been invited to. And what about Sarah? Was there something going on between them? Something I wasn't seeing? Something I didn't want to see? I needed answers, but the truth was, I was scared of what I might find. The next day, I came home early again, desperate to catch some glimpse of what was really happening behind the scenes. I told myself I wasn't being paranoid, that I was just being a good husband, a good brother. But when I walked into the house, I was met with the sound of voices, low and hushed, just out of sight. I followed the sound down the hallway and stopped outside the living room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see them, Sarah and Caleb, sitting close together on the couch. Sarah's hand was resting on his arm, and Caleb was leaning in, speaking in that soft voice of his. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I couldn't tell you what made me step back, what kept me from barging in right then and there. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was self-preservation. But I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I stood there in the hallway, the weight of what I'd just seen sinking deep into my chest. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But the other part of me knew, deep down, that I couldn't. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It wasn't just about Caleb. This was about Sarah. And the thing is, sometimes the truth is easier to deny than it is to face. The next few days were a blur. It felt like I was walking through a fog, every interaction with Sarah and Caleb seeming more surreal than the last. I couldn't get the image of them together out of my mind, her hand resting on his arm, his soft whispers that I could practically hear in the silence of my thoughts. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that there was some innocent explanation for what I had seen. But deep down, I knew better. I knew something was wrong. Something was happening that I couldn't ignore. Sarah was acting distant, but not in the way she had been before. Before, it was as if she was just distracted by life, by work, by the kids. But now, she was deliberately avoiding me. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and when she did speak, her voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. I tried to make things right. I tried to engage her, ask her about her day, about how things had been at work. But her answers were always short, clipped. And Caleb, well, Caleb was suddenly showing up at all the wrong times. One afternoon, I came home early from work, eager to spend time with Sarah. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Caleb's car parked out front, and my heart dropped. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something in my gut told me I wasn't going to like what I found inside. I walked in quietly, trying to avoid making noise. I didn't want to confront them just yet. I wasn't ready to face whatever truth was lurking in the shadows. But the second I stepped inside, I heard their voices from the living room, and it was impossible to ignore. "We can't keep doing this," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It's not right, Caleb. It's not fair to Jack." I stopped in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. My chest tightened, and my hands began to shake. I wanted to move, to go in there and confront them, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place. Caleb's voice came next, calm and steady, but with an edge to it. "Sarah, you're not doing anything wrong. You're not happy. I can see it, and you're not alone in this. We're both here, trying to figure things out." I could hear Sarah's breath catch, and then the sound of her trying to steady herself. "I never wanted it to be like this, but I don't know how to fix it anymore, Caleb. I don't know what to do." I could hear the soft rustle of fabric, the sound of them moving closer together, and then silence. The kind of silence that says everything that needs to be said without a single word. And in that silence, my world fell apart. I didn't know how long I stood there, listening to them, the weight of their conversation crushing me. My mind was racing, the words replaying over and over again in my head. "It's not fair to Jack." I couldn't breathe. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to disappear. But I couldn't. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. I couldn't pretend I didn't know what was happening between them. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I didn't know if I could handle it. So I did what I always did when things got too hard. I buried it. I buried the pain, buried the anger, and walked out of the house before anyone could see the storm brewing inside of me. I went to the bar that night. I needed space. I needed to think, to process everything that had happened. The noise of the bar was overwhelming, but at least it kept my mind occupied. I ordered a drink, then another, and another after that. The alcohol wasn't helping, but it was something, anything to distract me from the truth that was gnawing at me. I'd always been the kind of person who dealt with problems head on. But this was different. This wasn't a problem I could just solve by working harder or thinking it through. This was a betrayal of the worst kind, and I didn't know how to fix it. As I sat there, nursing my third drink, I kept hearing their voices in my head over and over again. Sarah and Caleb. Caleb and Sarah. Their words, their closeness, it was all too much to bear. And the worst part? The worst part was that I didn't know if I even had the strength to confront them. What would I say? How could I even begin to ask her about it? What if she denied it? What if she said it wasn't true? Could I live with that lie, that shadow hanging between us? I slammed my glass down on the table, frustrated, angry, and helpless. The bartender glanced at me, but I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore, except the knot in my stomach, the ache in my chest, and the crushing realization that everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my life, was nothing but an illusion. When I got home, I was drunker than I should have been. My head was spinning, and my body felt heavy, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I stumbled through the door, barely noticing the quiet that greeted me. Sarah was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, as though nothing had happened, as though everything was still normal. Sarah, I said, my voice slurred. We need to talk. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, but I could see the hesitation there too. The same hesitation I had seen in Caleb's eyes. The same hesitation that had started to creep into my soul. Jack, you've been drinking, she said, her voice soft, as though she was trying to soothe me. I don't care, I said, my words thick with emotion. We need to talk about Caleb, about what's going on between you two. Her face paled, and for the first time, I saw the guilt in her eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth was right there, hanging between us, and for the first time, I didn't need her to say it. I already knew, but I needed to hear it. I needed her to say it. Sarah, I whispered, my voice shaking. Tell me the truth. The silence that followed my words felt like an eternity. Sarah didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes were locked on mine, wide and unblinking. I could see the weight of everything in her gaze, the guilt, the fear, the shame. It was there, unmistakable. But there was something else too, something that twisted my insides even more than the betrayal itself. I waited for her to say something, anything, but all she did was look away. She shifted slightly on the couch, her body language a clear attempt to create some distance between us. It stung. I wanted her to deny it, to tell me I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack, I never wanted you to find out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. The words hung in the air, heavy with a kind of sorrow that only made the situation worse. Her apology felt hollow, like it was just a formality, something she thought she had to say. I didn't want apologies. I wanted answers. How long? I asked, my voice barely controlled. I had been holding it together, but now the floodgates were open, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep the anger at bay. Jack, she began, but the words trailed off. She was struggling. I could see it. The truth wasn't easy for her, but I didn't care. I needed it. How long? I repeated, my tone more forceful this time. Her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. A few months, she confessed, her eyes downcast. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. A few months, I repeated in disbelief, the anger rising in me. How could you, Sarah? How could you do this to me? To us. She didn't respond right away. Her lips trembled, and I saw the tears welling up in her eyes. She looked up at me, and for a moment, it felt like she was searching for something, an explanation, perhaps, or a way to justify what she had done. But there was no justification, not for this. I don't know, she said, her voice cracking. I've been so lost, Jack. You've been so distant, and Caleb, he made me feel seen. He listened to me. He made me feel like I mattered again. Her words were like a slap to the face. I had been there for her, hadn't I? I had been there, working long hours, trying to provide for our family. I had given her everything I could, but it wasn't enough. It never felt like enough. But that doesn't make it right, I said through gritted teeth. That doesn't excuse what you did. You betrayed me, Sarah. You betrayed everything we built together. She started to cry then, the tears streaming down her face. I'm so sore. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the door after slamming it in Caleb's face. The silence in the house was deafening, and the weight of everything that had happened settled in my chest like a lead balloon. There was no escaping it now. No going back. I turned back to Sarah, who was still sitting on the couch, her body curled into itself, her hands clasped in her lap as if trying to keep herself together. She looked small and fragile, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the confident woman I had once known. This was a woman who had betrayed me, betrayed everything we had worked so hard to build. But even as the anger coursed through me, even as the hurt continued to deepen with every passing second, there was something else. Something I couldn't quite place. Was it pity? Or maybe the faintest trace of the love I used to feel for her? I couldn't tell. Sarah, I started, but the words got caught in my throat. There was no easy way to say what needed to be said. There was no magic phrase that would take away the sting of her betrayal. She looked up at me then, her eyes swollen from crying, her lips trembling. "Jack, please," she whispered, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." I swallowed hard, trying to control the flood of emotions that threatened to overtake me. "You already did," I said, my voice low and raw. "You hurt me, Sarah, and you hurt us. This isn't something I can just forget." She nodded, tears falling freely now. I know, but I never stopped loving you. I got lost, Jack. I thought I could fix us by finding someone else. I was so lonely." "Lonely?" I echoed, shaking my head. "How could you think that was the answer? How could you think running to Caleb, of all people, was going to make things better?" She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, her hands clasped tighter now, as if she could hold on to herself long enough to find the right words. But there were no right words. There were only broken pieces. There were only regrets. I let out a shaky breath, trying to compose myself. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah. I don't even know if I want to." She flinched at the words, and for a moment, I thought she might break again. "Understand," she whispered. "I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't." There it was, the truth. She knew what she had done, and she knew the consequences better than anyone. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. I walked across the room to the window, staring out at the quiet street beyond. The world felt so still, so unchanged, and yet everything inside me had shifted. My whole life had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and I didn't know if I could ever put the pieces back together. "What happens now?" I asked quietly, though I wasn't really asking her. I was asking myself. I didn't know where to go from here, how to move forward, how to live with the knowledge that everything I thought I knew was a lie. "Jack," Sarah said softly, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want this to be the end of us." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound of her voice, trying to block out the way it broke my heart all over again. But it didn't stop the tears from coming. Tears that I didn't know I had left. Tears for the life we'd built. Tears for the love we'd shared. And tears for the woman I had once trusted more than anyone else in the world. I turned back to her, my expression hard. "I don't know what I want anymore. Sarah, I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Her face crumpled, and she gasped, fresh tears falling. "I never wanted this, Jack. Please don't give up on me. On us." But I was already slipping away from her, already feeling the distance grow between us with each passing second. The betrayal was too much. The lies were too much, and I wasn't sure I could ever find my way back to her. For the next few days, we barely spoke. The house felt colder, quieter. We went through the motions of daily life. Eating dinner, getting the kids ready for school, pretending that everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Not anymore. I tried to go about my work, to bury myself in my responsibilities. But every time I looked at Sarah, I saw Caleb's face in my mind. Every time I saw her smile, I wondered how many times she had smiled at him the same way. How many times she had touched him the way she used to touch me. And that was the hardest part. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the knowledge that I had lost her, that she had chosen someone else, even for just a moment, even in her confusion. She had chosen him over me. The kids were too young to understand what was happening, but they sensed the tension. They could feel the strain in the air. It wasn't long before they started asking questions. Simple questions, innocent questions. Why is mommy sad, Daddy? Why don't you two laugh together anymore? It broke me every time they asked because I couldn't give them an answer that made sense. How do you explain infidelity to a child? How do you tell them that the person who was supposed to protect their family had torn it apart? I didn't know. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest thing of all. That's the end.